A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to Cape Wine, day 3 thereof, as we get into the final stretch of what has been an extraordinary few days. There was a lot of hype around Cape Wine, a lot of excitement, a lot of expectation, and I think it's pretty fair to say that all of that has been surpassed, because it has been a truly outstanding celebration of all that is wonderful about South African wine. People coming in from all over the world, meeting old friends, discovering new ones, and drinking wine that once again South Africa has shown to be as good as anywhere on the planet. And now, before we get the show started, just a quick dispellation, if that's a word, of rumours. It is not true at all that either myself or my guest went to bed at 3 o'clock this morning after a very important wine meeting at the Puosha Producers Silo Party. Thank you, Brewer Raats, for closing it at 3 o'clock this morning. But I tell you what, both guests, I think, are looking rather good this morning. Jo, welcome, and lovely to have you in person rather than the other end of a screen.
I know, it's quite surreal, isn't it, Dan, to actually be in real life. And I was in bed by 9 p.m. I don't know what you're suggesting.
No, it's scurrilous rumours. You talk about it being surreal. How surreal is it as head of WOSA for the UK to actually finally be out here and part of Cape Wine after so much planning, preparation and excitement?
It's genuinely incredible. I think for the last few years, you know, we haven't been travelling. The last time I was in South Africa was 2019. And to actually be able to get out here, to be able to bring people out, to see all the producers and winemakers that we've kind of, as you said, seen over Zoom for many, many months now, to get back out here has just been wonderful. And I think the whole group that I brought over from the UK, plus the buyers that are here and the importers, are just so stoked to be back out in the winelands, seeing the mountains, seeing the sunshine, tasting the wines, chatting to people. It's been truly special.
We had Greg Sherwood on the show yesterday talking about South African wine in the UK. David Cartwright from Seckford on the day before also doing that. It genuinely does seem that from afar, what we've looked at in the UK as being an excitement about South African wine is very, very visible amongst those people from the UK who have come over here for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we've talked before about the investment and the interest that the UK market has in South Africa, and I think we've seen that in the sheer number of people that have gone on the plane to come back out here. The support that we had when the pandemic hit and all of those challenges that we had, but I think now it's just about tasting great wines and finding new things to discover. And actually, I think that's the thing with a show like Cape Wine, is that you find things that you didn't know about. You know, it's all those new kind of exciting little pockets of interest that you only know about because you're actually out in the winelands and out in Cape Town kind of making those discoveries.
And there have been discoveries aplenty. I've been discovering all sorts of new wine myself. So for people who've come over from the UK, I imagine there'll be many times more that. How much from your past Cape Wine experience do you see that translate in the kind of 3 to 6 months afterwards in terms of actually bringing that South African wine into the UK and getting it into the market?
Yes, well, I mean, obviously it's been 4 years since we had the last Cape Wine, because it was supposed to happen last year and didn't. And I think I know a lot of the people that are out here are actually looking for increasing their portfolios, looking for new producers to bring on board. So I expect that we'll see quite a big impact, in 6 months' time.
The impact we already have is not inconsiderable. That's thanks to yourself and your team, who do a terrific job. And one of the conversations we've had many times before is, what do you choose to celebrate South African wine with? Because there are so many different varietals we are able to champion. From just your own personal sense and what you've seen over the last couple of days, what is really exciting you from a wine perspective now?
Well, as you say, South Africa is this, treasure trove of winemaking possibilities. So we never just focus in on sort of one or two things. The variety, the diversity is actually what makes South Africa such a special place to get wine from. But we do have our kind of flagship varieties in Chenin Blanc and Pinotage, and I think people are drawn to those as a kind of go-to as something different. We've seen a lot of success with Sauvignon Blanc in terms of filling the gap that New Zealand kind of left in terms of not having the volumes, and South Africa was able to kind of jump in and fill that space. And what I think is really nice is looking at the different regions. So as part of the show here, we've had the free pour tastings, which have been showcasing all of the different wine regions, and they really are so different. You know, you look at kind of Constantia compared to Swartland, it could almost be a different country. So I think that's been a really interesting way to communicate about the wines as well.
Give me an idea of the people who have come over from the UK market who are showing all this excitement.
It's a real mix, actually. So we've got a lot of our top trade media are here, specialist wine writers. We've got buyers from the specialist independent wine merchants, which is a really important part of the UK market for us because they have a real focus on premium South Africa, which is something that we've wanted to build on. But we've got multiple retail buyers over here. We've got importers. I mean, it's kind of ticks all the boxes, really.
They are going to go back with renewed vigour and enthusiasm for South African wine, I'm sure. How does this then shape your strategy going forward with South African wine in the UK?
Well, we really are sort of staying quite focused on the strategy that we've got in place, which is to keep building the premium image of South African wine and really just engaging people in all of the things that South Africa does so well. You know, it delivers incredible quality, it delivers incredible value for money, and telling the story again, which has obviously been a huge focus for Cape Wine, which is a sustainability story. So making sure that that gets communicated to people that South Africa does have this incredible sustainability program, and we're seeing a lot more focus on that in terms of UK buyers and ultimately consumers. So that's a really important part of our communication strategy, and the ethical trade side of things as well. So it's, you know, people, place, prosperity. That's our kind of overarching theme, and I think that's going to continue.
Last one for you, because I know you've got plenty more wine to get through before the end of today. If you could sum up what you feel Cape Wine has delivered over these few days.
I think it's just the renewed excitement. It's, you know, South Africa is such a fabulous country, but the excitement of getting out here and talking to people and tasting new wines. It's a renewed energy, I think, and I think Cape Wine really brings that around the world.
Oh, wow. Well, look, thank you for coming out, for being part of it, for not being out until 3 o'clock in the morning, wild wine parties and having great fun there. And thanks for being a great friend of Dan Really Likes Wine.
Well, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
So there we go. Jo looks after Woza in the UK, and she's also part of the Wine Tribe. Look out for that coming back soon as we continue to celebrate South African wine around the world, and in particular in the UK. All right, as Jo says goodbye, let us move on to our next guest, who's somebody who has been on the show before. Again, somebody I'm very happy to finally have in person, who has come out all the way from Australia, where he has a great focus on South African wine as part of a rather cool competition that he has. Ross, welcome. Lovely to have you here in person.
Great to see you finally in person. How are you?
I'm extremely well. I think I can probably guess the answer to this, but are we having a good time at Cape Wine?
We're having an amazing time. It's such a vibe. It's so good to see everyone. I mean, we've had to develop relationships digitally over the last 3 to 4 years with COVID and all that. And now we can finally meet the people and shake their hand and you know, transact, understand what's happening in the industry. And it's just an amazing vibe.
The wine that you focus on very proudly is South African.
Yep.
But it does sit in a market that has its own fairly sizable wine industry. Give us a sense of the impact that people like yourself are able to have with South African wine in Australia.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Dan. There's always been South African wine in the industry in Australia, and as you say, a very loyal industry to the Australian wine. circles that are around there. A lot of New Zealand wine comes into that market as well. We've done estimates of a $1 billion market, of which 500 million is dedicated to New Zealand, of which 80% of that is New Zealand Sauv Blanc. So we're really up against it. And then the other half of that is your typical players, your French, Italian, Spanish, German, and then South Africa is down at the bottom. But we engaged in this 4 or 5 years ago, and we've been building slowly and building some traction. And when we've got pillar brands like Kononkorp and Meerlust and Capensis and Warwick in the stable, and others sitting right there supporting all those brands, and we're really knocking the doors down in the fine dining restaurants, in the on-trade, and direct to consumer is really where we're focusing on these three cores of our business. And we're starting to see acceptance as the COVID chain moved through. The online retail spiked, wholesale died obviously, but now we're seeing that trend reverse as people are coming out of hibernation and back into that. So the wholesale trade is picking up, and they're asking for new things. What's new? What's exciting? What can you offer our winers? So we made the trip. It was a 22-hour flight, which is painful on the butt, but we're here on the ground, shaking hands and tasting some amazing wines.
Our history of competition with Australia, certainly from a sporting perspective, isn't always the happiest. And I look at cricket in particular. I hope that we're having a little more success in the wine space. What's the selling point? How are you telling the South African wine story to an Australian audience?
Well, we're really trying to change the focus and the shift from the old world. I mean, the Australian audience, let's start with the Australian audience. They're adventurous, they're perceptive, they like to try new things. They're always going to support the Australian industry. But sort of that Friday, Saturday, Sunday afternoon when they're looking for something special, wind down from the week or have their friends around, they like to be adventurous, and that's where we're aiming to be, putting a glass of Kononkorp Estate into their hand and say, you've had a hard week, try this. You like Pinot Noir, try Pinotage, and Cabernets from Stellenbosch are world class, and it's really taken the amazing wines of Coonawarra and the Cabernets that come out of Australia and saying, have a look at Stellenbosch. We also champion Chenin Blanc and Pinotage, a point of difference in the industry.
From the few days that you've had here, lots of familiar wine, I'm sure, but also
Absolutely.
New discoveries aplenty. What are you taking away from this event in terms of where you think South African wine is now?
It's at a level I don't remember it's that good. So the history is I grew up in South Africa until I left at the age of 21, and I worked in the industry here for 5 years. And I can remember what the wines were like, and then obviously through my other adventures and endeavours with the Global Fine Wine Challenge, I'm very fortunate to see the progress that South Africa is making in their Chenin, their Cabernets, their Bordeaux blends. But I think across the line here, everything I've tasted has been at another level. There's fruit intensity, there's great winemaking, there's passionate people, and there's a very broad spectrum of price points that these guys are making wines into. So I think the takeaway is, and we keep saying it, is South Africa is the best kept secrets of the wine world. And it's evident here today with the buzz in the room.
Very quickly, update on the Global Fine Wine Challenge.
For the first time ever, I'm in country as the stock is about to leave. So top 120 wines from South Africa are in the warehouse in Cape Town and are flying out on Monday. They'll be in Sydney by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. Canada landed, top 120. The US is leaving next Wednesday, Thursday. New Zealand is leaving end of next week. And Australia is flowing in, and there's some amazing wines coming in, Dan. South Africa is going to be right up there again. I'm hoping that we can do Bordeaux blend again, Chenin Blanc again, and we did white blends last year. So when I say again, I've got to be careful because I'm wearing a different hat for that one, and I've got to root for everyone equally. But it's going to be a humdinger of a year.
We look forward to it. Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
And enjoy what's left of Cape Wine.
Thank you.
So there we go. Go check out the Global Fine Wine Challenge online when you get a moment. Ross doing a fabulous job flying the flag of South African wine in Sydney, but also bringing together new world wines from across the planet and celebrating therein. Right, from London to Sydney to the continent of Africa. And it's a space where I think the South African wine story still has a great deal of opportunity and a lot of excitement. So let's head into Africa and meet some new guests. And a very warm welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Good to have you here. Introduce yourself to our audience. Where do we find you from?
Okay, I'm actually from Nigeria. My name is Michael Effiong. I'm a journalist. I work for a celebrity journal called Ovation International. We're an African-based Hello type magazine, and I'm based out of Lagos.
Brilliant. Well, welcome. It's lovely to have you here.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to be able to celebrate the rest of Africa here at Cape Wine.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of South African wine in Nigeria. How much of a presence is there?
In the last couple of years, there's been that synergy. Because the Nigerian market is a bit difficult, because that's what I keep hearing from the producers that I've met, along the way, that they've had difficulty, registration and all those things, but it's been growing over the last few years. And I think the Nigerians are getting into the flow of South African wine, I think.
What about wine as a whole? How much of a role does it play in the lives of most Nigerians? Is it a cultural fixture?
From the kind of job that I do, of course, I attend a lot of social events. Wine is generally drunk at parties, but I see that Nigerians do more champagnes and whiskeys, brandies than wine. The wine culture is not very strong in Nigeria as it is, like I've noticed in South Africa, at least in Cape Town.
Where it is very strong indeed. I'm glad you're getting a chance to see that.
Yeah.
If champagne is big, then is South African Cap Classique, South African bubbles,
Yes.
having a bit of an impact?
Yes, they are. I mean, the last time they visited, there's this wine tasting events they hold in Lagos. I noticed that the Nigerians were really sampling the bubbles from South Africa, and because everyone is price conscious these days, so comparatively the South Africans are giving the Europeans and Americans a run for their money in terms of that segment of the market.
I'm glad to hear that. That is good news indeed. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of the wine scene in Lagos. If you go out to most restaurants, are there pretty comprehensive wine lists? Are there wine bars? How much of a presence does wine have?
Like I said, the wine culture is not that much, but at the top restaurants,
Yep.
You have very good, wine sections. You can get the very vintage to the new, the General Sauvignon, Pinot. You have them, but you have a few people that are collectors. I mean, those are in private homes, but it is not, like I said, I believe that gradually we'll get to that level where we'll start appreciating the art of wine. But we're not there yet.
Well, it's a journey that South African wine hopes to be part of.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience here over the course of this week.
It's been interesting. This is actually my second Cape Wines. And what I found interesting is the personal touch and the family touch of the South African wine companies. I had a discussion with a gentleman the other day. He's the 8th generation of his family business. So that kind of stability is very good for any business at all. And I noticed that in most of the wine producing companies that I've seen, most of them are family owned. And I see the dedication from generation to generation, which is something that we on the other side of the continent, I'm talking West Africa, in our businesses, I'm just looking at the business structure now, we need to learn from. Because if you have that kind of stability, I mean, you can only get better. And I'm not surprised that the South African wine industry is competing worldwide because of that generational, transition of the story of the business. So one of the things I've found out from Cape Wines is an opportunity to make friends and also to learn more and more about the wine business and the industry.
Just as we're learning from you about Nigeria, and I appreciate that. Final question for you, Michael, before we let you head off.
By the way, are you South African?
I was actually born in Northern Ireland, grew up in Zimbabwe,
Okay.
now called South Africa home.
So now you're an African.
I am indeed, very much so. And I'm looking forward to visiting Nigeria, which I
Okay.
haven't done before.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are lots of South Africans, lots of winemakers who'd love to have a presence in Nigeria.
Okay.
What would your advice be to a South African wine producer looking at Nigeria as a possible market?
Yes, I've met a couple of them here, but the first hurdle actually is to find a genuine partner out of Nigeria, and then to have patience, because the Nigerian regulatory authorities are very, very strict about that industry. So you need to have a lot of patience. But the DGB, I'm just seeing them around the back behind us, and the KWV, they are very, very strong. They have loads of brands in Nigeria, so they've been able to cross that hurdle. So for anyone who wants to enter the Nigerian market, it's huge, but you need to have patience. It is not somewhere you rush into, because you're going to rush out if you rush into it.
And I suspect when they get to Lagos, just mention that they know you, and then they're on the front foot.
And I'll take you to all the fine places to meet the right guys in the wine business.
Brilliant. Michael, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on the show. Safe travels home.
Okay.
And keep supporting South African wine.
No problem. We will exchange numbers later.
I look forward to it.
Okay, cheers.
There we go. Joining us from Lagos, visiting Cape Wine this week. Thank you, Michael, with a bit of a perspective on the wine market in Lagos, where it seems there is an appetite for wine, especially for bubbles, but still some work for South Africa to do. And I've got no doubt that Murimi and the Woza team will be doing exactly that. All right, let us say goodbye to Nigeria and say hello to Bill from Ghana. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you for having us.
That's
How are you doing?
Great pleasure. I'm extremely well. The smile on your face suggests you're having a pretty good time.
You can see behind me, there's a lot going on here, so I'm excited.
Tell me about wine in Ghana. It's not a place I visited, sadly. I've got some good friends from Ghana. They tell me it's the greatest country in the world and I need to come and visit.
Absolutely.
What am I going to find from a wine perspective in Ghana?
Associated States in wine, appreciation for South African wines, and appreciation for life and happiness.
You've sold me. When do I come?
Tomorrow.
You mentioned South African wine. I'm very glad to hear that. How much of a presence does South African wine have in Ghana?
It's a dominant wine brand of varietal in Ghana right now. We've been on the emergence since 2015. The ascension of South African wines can be attributed to the investment wines of South Africa has made in the market and appreciation for African brands. That's what has made the South African brands in Ghana very, very, very comfortable in the position in which we are.
And then in the context of Ghana and its culture, will most Ghanaians have a glass of wine with dinner, order a bottle of wine when they go out to a restaurant?
In the past, I would say no. Currently, it's on ascension because economic growth in Ghana has created a middle class and upper class, so the appreciation for wine is going up. So you go out to restaurants in Ghana, meals are all paired with wines now, so it's quite amazing, interesting. That's why you guys should come and see us in Ghana.
I definitely would. A good friend of mine, Matthew Mentor, keeps trying to
persuade
me to come over. I think he's everyone's friend. Matthew knows everybody.
Matthew's everyone's friend. He's an amazing human being.
He certainly is. So dinner then with you and Matthew when I get to Ghana. As in when you open a wine list at a restaurant, what kind of percentage roughly of South African wine would be on that wine list?
I think it's 20% on the wine list. When you go to certain institutions or restaurants or establishments, you see predominantly South African wines, but average is about 20% on the wine list. We have a competition from the European brands because they are colonially entrenched in West Africa, followed by some competitors for Latin America. But South African wines is emerging, so we're working hard on that.
That's very good to hear. And then with the wine industry in Ghana, it's nice to hear that it is growing. We'd like to be part of that growth as South African wine. What do you think South African wine industry can do more of in terms of growing in Ghana?
Well, that's an interesting question to ask because that's what we are here in Cape Wine to see and encourage the South African wine brands to look into Africa. The challenge is that most South African wine brands gear toward Europe and the Americas, neglected the African continent. I know it's commercial interest. They know there are technical barriers to trade in Africa, but the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that's being worked on right now will facilitate the movement of goods and services in our continent. So I will encourage the wine companies here, even though it's challenging right now, they should have a long-term vision for Africa and engage the African consumer in a way that is traditional to the context of each country, because our palates are different, our cuisines are different. You don't target West African market with European sophisticated palette of branding towards a wine pairing. So that is the challenge we have with the South African wine industry. We are doing a lot of work. WUSA is engaging the producers to engage in a WUSA West African tour that they conduct every year to reach the consumers directly in Ghana, Nigeria, and other African countries. So this is what we want the South African wine companies to look at. Africa has the potential. Africa is the future. All those European and American markets are exhausted. Look into Africa and patronize it and let us be one and grow our continent. That's what I would say to South African wines.
I think that's a terrific assessment. It includes some very fair criticism of where we've looked as an industry. But I think that is starting to shift. And obviously people like yourself help.
For it.
Part of understanding the market, as you say, and growing into it, is knowing a little bit more about that culture. And a big culture is the food when it comes to wine. So probably the most important question I can ask you today. Who makes the best jollof rice?
You don't need to ask. It's Ghana. What else is there's no competition?
I'll bring Michael back from Nigeria. See what he says.
Bring him back. He knows we can do a jollof competition right here in Cape Wine, and you can see who tastes better. We made the best jollof.
What I would like to know is, with that jollof rice, what wine am I drinking?
Chenin Blanc.
Chenin Blanc. I thought you might say that.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a great combination.
The best way is Chenin Blanc. Chardonnay is also good,
Uh-huh.
but for the best pairing for jollof is Chenin Blanc.
Yes.
South African Chenin Blanc. I don't want to give any particular brand, but I know which one to pair with.
All right. Well, we shall put that on the menu.
Yeah.
Final question for you before you sneak away. Just your experience over the last few days. What are you taking away from Cape Wine?
Great improvement. Thank God we're back after the COVID. My takeaway is that it's growing. It's a growing industry. The engagement of South African wines and African countries is quite interesting to see the development, the growth, and we're excited that we came here to experience today. So we are very grateful for you guys hosting it once again. This is my third time at Cape Wine. So I've seen the beginning, 2015, 2018, and now it's a great improvement. We thank you guys for doing the hard work.
No, well, thank you for being part of it. Thank you for coming down to South Africa and for being a great champion of South African wine. And we'll see you for dinner with Matthew, jollof rice and Chenin Blanc in Accra.
Deal.
Deal's done.
Deal done. Matthew, he has to call us soon. Thank you guys for having us.
Well, thank you very much. Joining us from Ghana and giving some more West African perspective on wine and the potential for South Africa to do more on the continent. I think Bill's comment that we've always looked at Europe, looked at America, and maybe not seen as much of Africa as we could have is a fair one. Yes, as Bill says, there are some challenges to getting wine into Africa, but also a huge amount of opportunity. And all the more so when the wine is quite as good as it is. And speaking of extremely good wine, possibly the most excited person at Cape Wine this week, but not because of Cape Wine itself, but because she's been off farming and having lots of fun. Very lovely to see you with some wonderful news, because you have done something that you and I have spoken about many times in the past,
Yes.
and you've been threatening to do it and threatening to do it and threatening to do it, and now you've done it. What is that?
Yes, so I've planted 50 Pinot Noir vines on my property. And it's a first for Tesla's Dal. And it's something that I wanted to do and has been nagging at me because I've got very tough soils and it's a water scarce area. And my water is salty as well. So I've got salty water, salty soils, and the odds is against the vines. So I got different rootstocks and it's all Pinot Noir. And I planted it on 5 different spots on my property. So that was the thing that we did actually last week, Tuesday. And my dad and my son helped. And I actually got together a whole group of people in a very short amount of time. And so we're currently rooting for the vines. So I must say I was standing here at Cape Wine, but I was WhatsApping under my stand to viticulturist Dean Leppen that is consulting for me. And I'm asking, Dean, what should we spray, on the vines? And Dean sent me a very calm message back saying, so Barine, did it bud? Did it start to bud yet? And I write back, no. And Dean says, well, step away from the vines. I let you know when to spray. I let you know when to do stuff. So we are very, very excited. It's a history in the making, and it's a dream come true for us. So even if one vine survives there, and I must add, then I'm planting 2 hectares.
It is just another step, though, in this extraordinary journey of yours, whereby you keep doing things that people don't expect you to be able to do, and you have this self-belief that is unwavering. Do you still pitch yourself a bit? Do you still suddenly shake you and think, this is surreal? Can this really be happening?
My whole story is surreal to me. My whole story, I came from Tesla's Dal as the nanny to Anthony Hamilton Russell's kids. About a month later, he steered me into this wine business side of things. In 2014, gave me the startup cost to start my own business. Tesla's Dal was born in 2015. Bought property in 2019 to erect a cellar and plant vineyards. I never thought the vineyard thing would be a true thing, and now we've planted last Tuesday. And so I just enjoy it so much. Every step is like a little victory. So Cape Wine is a victory for me. It's my first rodeo, Tesla's Dal first rodeo. Beautiful wines, Cape Wine.
And it's proving a popular one, because when I came over to chat to you, I had to stand in a bit of a queue because there were a lot of fans of Tesla Rasdal. What's the reception been? And how cool is it when somebody comes over and says, I know who you are, I know your wine, That must be really special.
It is really special, Dan. The wine is beautifully received because it's beautiful wines. I'm very proud of the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay that I put out, and it has just been amazing. And I was amazed to see how many people know Teslasol. I kind of call it the Teslasol cult. And to be honest, I had a message yesterday from Stefanas and Anzel Rabi saying, we hope you are at Cape Wine. We are here today and we're looking out for your stand. So, I mean, it's like, even you, it's celebrities coming. It's celebrities coming to seek out Teslasol, and that's very special.
What for you then does this say about the South African wine industry when a person who's come from a very kind of a non-wine background is able to, in a fairly short space of time, get into the place that you are now? How does that reflect, do you think, on the industry?
I think it reflects well on the industry because if your wines is good, the wine speak for itself. And the wine is really the superstar of Teslasol. My history, my personality, and my whole business ethic is just a bonus. The wine speaks for itself. It's beautiful wines. And I think that reflects as how it is received in the industry. And the industry is open. It's open to us.
You've also been doing some adventures recently. Tell me about your trip to America.
Yes. So I still work a full day for Hamilton Russell, right? So I took a week off and I went for a trade visit in the US. So Teslasol is available in 23 states, but I could only do 2. And I asked my importers, Vineyard Brands, what is like the 2 closest together. So I did New York for 2 days, and the remainder of the visit was Boston. So I just saw that, French wines is like the norm in the US. But I'm with very good importers, and I had back-to-back meetings, so not really time for sightseeing. But it was a whole different world for me. Manhattan,
it's a bit different to the Emiliana Valley, isn't it?
It is very. I'm a farm girl, Dan. I'm a farm girl, so yeah, I was bright, big buildings, no air coming really through. No breezes, no nature. It was something else. But Boston was beautiful. Sea World and all those things. Yeah, but it was good. It was successful. I like to refer to my visit as I came, I saw, I conquered. I came back, and then I planted.
And are ready to conquering some more. Tell me about the journey from this planting. If it all goes according to plan, what happens next?
Yes, so if it all goes according to plan, even if one vine survives, because it's on different rootstocks, so it's very experimental. I need to see which one can take the sodium in the soils. Is going to be farmed dry land, and then I'll be planting 2 hectares. So at the moment, I'm buying grapes in from the Yamlin Ridge on a contract basis from Lavage Babylon Vineyards. That contract will continue, so it will still be wine of origin Yamlin Ridge. But if my vines and my grapes are successful, after 3 years, I'll know what the quality is of the grapes and of the wines to be made, and then eventually I'll issue a wine of origin, from that area. So that is actually the goal.
I'm saying how excited you are now. I'm trying to imagine how excited you're going to be when that wine is actually in bottle, which I know it will be.
They'll probably have to lock me up or something. Because that's all I eat, think, dream, sleep. That's it. That is if the monstrous rabbit don't get my vines done.
I've heard about this rabbit. He sounds like a fearsome creature. Up until then, with where we are now, Teslasol, is production increasing? Are you broadening the footprint?
So Teslasol will never be quantity driven, but I did increase production a little bit. So I used to buy in 5 tons of Pinot, 5 tons of Chardonnay. So now I'm buying 10 tons of Chardonnay, 7 tons of Pinot, and the 2023 vintage will see 10 tons of Pinot Noir. So the production is going to up to 7,100 bottles each. Currently, the Pinot Noir is at 4,000 bottles. So I'm just taking the next.
I think you could do 40,000 bottles. You'd be selling them pretty quickly. Such is the popularity. Breen, love the story. Always love having you on Dan Really Likes Wine.
Thank you.
And I'm going to say this on camera, so I can't get out of it. I'm coming to visit.
You're recording, right?
I'm recording. I'm coming to visit. I'm coming to see this patch of land that is so special to you. And I'm also going to be front of that queue to buy the wine when it's in bottle.
We have it on camera. Thank you, Dan. I'm going to hold you to it.
Please do. There we go. Breen Sauls out at Tesla Rasdal. The story of the childminder who became a wine impresario. in her own right. And it's such a cool story. All right, let's go back to the African wine story. And somebody he's been annoying me all week, saying I'm going to bring you people to be on the show, but he just never arrives because he's just actually that popular. But we finally dragged him in onto the show. He has been on before, but in person. Matumi, welcome.
Good to see you again, and great to have you here.
Look, first of all, congratulations. You and the Woza team have done something very special this week.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And I think the spirit is showing itself that people are appreciative of this. Been long waited for this. COVID has messed us up, and voila, it's happening indeed.
One of the many aspects that I've loved about this is the world coming to Cape Town and focusing in on our wine industry, on the wines we produce. And that world has included a sizable chunk of people from the rest of Africa. I've met Kenyans, I've met Nigerians, I've met Ghanaians, a whole pile of people who have come in. That is your space. How are we looking since our last conversation on the South African wine footprint on the rest of the continent?
I think we've made some good strides in terms of growth, both volume and value. So the actual fascinating thing about the continent is that there's a lot of thirst for knowledge. There's a lot of opportunities of us educating, upskilling people about wine, the etiquette of wine, and automatically that translates to them wanting to learn more about where wine comes from, who makes the wine, what regions, and automatically it translates to wine tourism. So we are growing in all angles, from appreciating wine to levels also of selling more quality wine.
We had, thanks to you, Bill from Ghana with us just a moment ago, and he made a couple of really good points about South African wine in Africa. One of them was that he felt that Africa had almost been a bit neglected by many South African wine producers, but the other was that in a country like Ghana, as the economy grows, there is an emergence of a wine drinking population. I think those kind of come together in terms of shaping the push into an African market that hasn't been tapped nearly as much as it could be.
No, without doubt. Obviously, we should also be practical. The fact that we come from a history where wine actual exports started in the UK, in the European markets. So automatically that was just where the focus was. I think it was in the era of 2010 World Cup build-up that the industry felt that, we're missing out. We cannot have other wine regions come and actually take our food. Africa is our space. So we needed to make that impact. We did so. And we started working on that. Yes, it's been neglected, but we've made some good positioning of quality wine and be seen as a player in the African space.
Which is so important and also so exciting and also challenging. There are different countries with very different cultures, different appreciations. We've spoken on the show over the last few days about the challenges in Europe of going to somewhere like Sweden versus going to somewhere like Germany, the differences in those markets. How fragmented are the African markets in terms of the approach that you need to take to get wine in there?
And I'm glad that you see it for what it is. There are 54 countries, and it means in Africa there are some similarities, and definitely there would be a lot of differences. If you go to East Africa, for example, it's a totally different market. You'll find there are similarities, for example, in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, because of the region. But those similarities means if you strategize, you work to fit the market according to the needs. So Kenya, for example, is the fastest growing market for wine. Knowledge base is huge there. So even the WSET program is being rolled out in Kenya, other than South Africa in the continent. So there's opportunities. And then when you go to West Africa, you also have to think about that. The weather there is different. It's much hotter in those markets. It means you have to think about what wine will work best in that market, and as well what will be ideal for that market. Same with our strategy. I always look and apply myself according to the trends of the market and how they appreciate how they do things. So you cannot use a one strategy approach. Always have to think that it's different markets.
In terms of approaching those markets and how you sell the South African wine story, your colleagues in Europe and America are doing their best to shift the perception of South African wine belonging on the bottom shelf of the supermarket. And I think that job has been done to an extent. There's still work to do, but the appreciation of premium South African wine has been advanced considerably. What about in Africa? Where are you positioning South African wine? Where are people seeing South African wine?
Well, first of all, I teach them that it's an African product because it comes from the southern tip of the continent. So automatically they need to start learning to embrace South African wine as their own. I'm a big believer in the driver of the intra-trade within the continent. So we strategically position ourselves from being just not an entry-level wine, but a high-end wine. That is why premiumization is our focus strategy, educating people, because the more they're educated, the more they get interested to explore different wines. And that's the growth we see. So it cannot be that Africa is a market to be seen as an entry-level market. It's a high-end market, and there's big spending there. Typical, as you would find in South Africa, the South African main market, meaning the township markets, guys spend big monies there to just be associated with fine things in life. And that's the similarity we see in Africa. It's a huge opportunity for South Africa in terms of premiumization position.
What is the bigger challenge, broadly speaking? And I know speaking of Africa as one space is a bit of a misnomer, but is it largely speaking just getting people to drink wine as opposed to beer or whiskey or an alternative product, or is it getting them to drink South African wine rather than French or Italian or Spanish?
Truth of the matter is that certain, for example, francophone countries or lusophone countries would identify themselves with the Portuguese wine or the French wine. We are making inroads even in those markets, but you should be practical, and reality is that those French wine and Portuguese wine will still dominate. But where we find joy is where there's been not many of the presence of the other, wine producing regions. So we dominate in those spaces. Kenya, I think I'll safe to say 90% of the wine is South African. In as much as they're exploring, they're still very loyal to South African wine. And because South Africa has got so much to offer, there's so much to explore even within that space. So in essence, challenges could only be along the lines of access to market. That's one key area perhaps I can speak of. Everything else, Africa is accessible. Access to market, it's a matter of obviously regulations in the markets, duties and all of that, and unharmonized systems of customs. That's the biggest issue. But otherwise, it's open for business.
I'm really glad to hear that. I think it is a really, really important space for us going forward. One of the other points Bill made was Europe and America are exhausted. They've got far too much wine, and Africa is there, if not for the taking, then certainly for the taking too. Tommy, thank you so much. Keep up the fantastic work. And we've spoken about doing some adventures in Africa together. Let the coming year be the year in which that happens.
I'm going to take you up on that one because I think, obviously, having introduced you to some of the media guys from the continent, that's a space I want us to find that harmony and working together and creating opportunities for fellow Africans and like us for South African businesses.
I look forward to that. Enjoy the rest of Cape Wine and well done again.
Always great talking to you.
There we go. The man who is taking wine from South Africa into the rest of the continent and delivering such an important wine message. And we are supposed to be chatting to one of our guests from Kenya, but at the moment still awaiting. So just to give you an update on some of the stuff happening with Dan Really Likes Wine over the next little while. On Monday, we're going to be doing a wrap-up of Cape Wine with Siobhan Thompson, amongst others, as we look back on this week and what the major takeaways have been. We are also going to be catching up with a very special new bottle of wine. I was at a dinner last night with Michael van der Venter and the team from the Vinotech, and they have produced a limited edition Magnum in support of and paying tribute to the legacy of Dame P. Bailey, who we sadly lost earlier this year, and money from all of that is going to be going to a very important wine museum. So look out for some news on that, and catching up with Kevin Arnold and his brand new space. And then also, just to let you know that we have the Pick and Pay Wine Festival coming up at the end of October. That's the 22nd, 23rd at the Wanderers in Johannesburg. And we do hope to see you there. There is still a chance to get down and join us at Cape Wine. If you are in the trade and industry, you'd be very welcome to attend. But if you can't make it, we will be having a little more up for grabs over the course of the week. And then just to let you know, we have that weekend of wine adventure to win from Durbanville Hills, just one to look out for if you're shopping at Pick n Pay this week. Okay, we now go, as promised, to Kenya, which is a country I have visited. And so I welcome in Wanjiru. Please come and join us.
Thank
Welcome
you very
to
much.
the show.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Lovely to
Pleasure
have you
be
here. Well, it's great to have you here. And I'm particularly excited because I've just been speaking to Matomi, who tells me that Kenya is the fastest growing wine drinking country on the continent, and that 90% of the wine that you drink is South African. I think you're my new best friend.
It really is a great thing. I think there's the connection with South Africa. So African wine readily available, of course, through the different companies and importers like Distel Kenya, DGB, and the importers they work with in the country. There's been able to be this growth coming through. This is my third Cape Wine, for example. So it's always great to see and be here.
I've spent some time in Nairobi. I've drunk some good wine in Nairobi, and the people I've met have all loved wine. And that speaks to exactly those statistics I've just mentioned, that growth. So clearly the love of wine has become a fixture in the Kenyan food and culinary culture. Was that always the case?
Not always. Traditionally, we're a beer country. You know about East African breweries and our beer Tusker. But I think initiatives through the different countries and importers in the business are what has led to this growth. So let me mention a few things. Wines of South Africa started the relationship in Kenya in 2015. And every year they come and they train people before they do the trade show, which is like a mini version of the Cape Wine Show. So some people in hospitality, their first experience in a wine training was through a Wines of South Africa initiative. So that's really great, and I thank WOSA for that, for example. I am also the educator for the Wines and Spirits Education Trust program in Kenya. You know, the course based out of the UK. So now you see, since 2018, we've been training people to get level 1 qualification and level 2. That is great because hotels now actually demand to have someone who has some WSET certification, or if someone is going out to work in another country, they're also able to be a wine specialist and be able to work abroad as well. Kenyans travel a lot. Of course, they bring back those good behaviors of, food and wine exploration back into the country. And, we also have a wide expatriate community. We have the World Bank offices in Kenya. We have a lot of multinationals, and we also have the UN environmental program. So I think all these factors have led to wine being consumed more, and there being a great variety of South African wines, especially.
It's so exciting to hear, and I really like the aspect of WSET coming through, not just for the industry and for the employment it can gain, but it also suggests there are just normal, ordinary Kenyans, lawyers and doctors and teachers and bankers who themselves want to learn more about wine.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. In fact, I would dare say that half the students are hospitality, people working in hospitality, but others are just, people with an interest in wine and collectors. We hope to see the day we'll be having a big funfair like this kind of show, and perhaps even events getting a lot more sophisticated, right? Where perhaps usually it's probably a walk around or a varietal tasting sponsored by a particular producer. I look forward to now master classes and the like. You'd be excited to know we've always celebrated Pinotage Day in October.
Good for you.
Yeah, so Pinotage, for example, is something that's growing. We had a Cup Classic Day celebration as well. So we're getting more focused even in the events we're offering to the public.
I'm glad you mentioned varietals. I was chatting a little earlier to Michael from Nigeria, who was talking about the love of bubbles that they have in Nigeria. What about Kenya? Are there particular spaces that Kenyans lean towards?
Okay, I would say typically speaking, easy drinking styles have been what has been there. Of course, the bigger, sort of more commercial brands like Distel with their 4th Street and the like, or Van Loveren with their Four Cousins has been what sort of the entry-level space. But there's also quite a sophisticated group of people who, of course, know the brands and go for sort of more premium brands available. I don't know whether you went to the Capital Club when you came to Nairobi. It's a professional space, but then a lot of tastings are held there. There's, of course, the big brand hotels like Radisson Blue that have fine dining experiences also. And importers who bring wines also are having supper clubs and things like that. I personally love bubbles, and I especially like having them at the Kenyan coast.
Sounds like
So,
a great combination.
Have you been to Mombasa or Diani?
I haven't. The closest I've come is Zanzibar, and that coast was lovely. But I have a friend who used to work at a hotel in Mombasa and speaks
nice.
lovingly of it.
Exactly. Very, very nice space. So over our interactions with Wines of South Africa, we had been very Nairobi focused. But since 2020, 2021, we've also had a Mombasa component focusing on the people at the coast. So some people actually fly direct at the coast and never get to Nairobi. We want them to have premium wine experiences there, and that's a lovely place to have a Cap Classique.
I'm visioning it already. It sounds terrific. I've already agreed to go to Nigeria and to go to Ghana. I think I have to do another visit to Kenya and explore a bit more of it.
We'll do a bit of Nairobi, we'll do a bit of the coast, and we'll also take you to the bush as well.
What a
Masai
combination.
Mara,
That
yes.
sounds fantastic. Deciding where to go is a challenge. Deciding what wine to drink is a challenge. When you walk around here, when you see what is on offer, it's almost too much, isn't it?
It is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. So I developed a strategy, this being my third Cape Wine. I do the classes. So I focus on the speaker's corner because at least then you get, a half-hour lesson with that. There's also the formal seminars as well. Then I save some time to do the varietal tastings somewhere at the corner. And of course, you do have meetings with the different producers, which we also do. But the events in the evening are the ones where I can let loose. So yesterday there were 7. There was a decade varietal tasting. My goodness, that was something else. There was all the big names like Canon Corp. There was Meerlast. There was
That was the Sardi family wines, the Villafante.
wines, and Molyneux. It was just a very big concentration of, and I mean, I had wines I've never would have ordinarily tasted or probably even not afforded. So the evening events are where I let loose. I missed the Piwosa party yesterday. Today I definitely must go to the Zoo Crew party. Will you be there?
I am packing my bags and I'm going home to Johannesburg this afternoon. I don't think I could survive the Zoo Crew tonight.
What should I do? Please give me some tips on survival.
Oh, I think
Zoo Crew.
avoid Duncan Savage. That would probably be my first piece of advice. I'll ask you for some advice. We've spoken with Michael, with Matome, with Bill about going into the African market.
Yes.
But the African market is far more than just one big space.
Of course.
And even Kenya itself will have lots of different segments, lots of different areas. If producers are thinking about Kenya as a space to enter, what's your guidance for them?
Okay, first I would want to say you have to really have an open mind. I mean, I lived in South Africa before. I've done business here. I'm Kenyan. I've done business in Kenya. So you have to come with an open mind and leave all expectations. Unfortunately, a lot of South African companies in other industries have come and failed, but there's also others that have succeeded. So getting a very good local partner is one of your big bets. And we do have importers who are here servicing their old contracts and also looking for new opportunities. So getting a good partner is really important. Secondly, is understanding that there is money, there is disposable income. Kenyans have money to spend. It's a very nascent market. So I think it's an open canvas really about what you can do. There are people who are running import businesses and making money despite the tough regulatory environment. But then the thing about getting a good partner is that you're able to navigate that. Our retail space offers opportunities as well, but there's also some opportunities for exclusivity and sort of direct to consumer or direct to that. So I would classify the marketing this way. There is the game lodges, for example, because tourism is a big deal, and that's a very specific sort of category. Then there's the hotel, restaurants, and caterers who are huge. There's new restaurants opening up in Kenya every day. Of course, main hotel chains and the like. And then there's a large young population. So even sort of quirky themes, canned wine, new formats, very big space to operate. Then there is, of course, MICE, the meetings and incentive conferences, a big opportunity, as well as now the coastal beach sort of circuit. Kenya can also be a gateway to the East African community. I do know people have independent relationships in every country. And of course, the regulatory environment can be different. But getting into Kenya can easily get you into those spaces because we have people who are doing business in that as well. And some of the tariffs are harmonized. I must really appreciate the partners we have, like the South African High Commission. The Trade Council there has been very useful to our relationships with Wines of South Africa and assisting us with any of those processes that are trade related. I, representing WOSA in the office, also provides contacts and networks to the different people as well. So hit us up, and there's information on the different social media platforms for people who are covering this event who can also get you there. And then just have an open mind and, be open and come into business with us. We are really, really South African wines in Kenya have, I guess there's a premium, but there's also the fact that it's the only African country sort of that makes wine to the quality and the volumes and the diversity that we have. So that bit is covered. Just come and do your bit. We must be very careful not to use Kenya or African countries as a dumping ground for wine that is not necessarily maybe, I don't want to say suitable because of course it passes standards, but that it not be a dumping ground for wine, right? We want quality wine. We want people to tell their stories in a way that makes sense to us and connects with the universality of people who love wine. But yes, the opportunity is great. Come, and do come every so often.
Exciting times for wine in Kenya. One final question for you before we wrap up at Cape Wine for 2022. I almost started a West African civil war earlier by bringing up the subject of jollof rice with the Ghanaians and the Nigerians. When I come, not if I come, but when I come on this trip to Mombasa, Nairobi and the bush, give me a great Kenyan dish that I'm eating and just the right South African wine to pair it with.
Okay, great. Now, I laugh a lot because when we're teaching WSET, we talk about meals that are, sort of in restaurants and whatever. I would say you need to enjoy the indigenous foods, and there's quite a variety. So in Nairobi, of course, nyama choma is big, which is like the braai, but we don't quite do it the way you do it. It's typically goat meat, and we don't cut it up into pieces. You will get the whole leg of lamb on your table. The butcher will come with a chopping board, some salt on the side with that. That I would recommend any great pinotage to go with that. Nyama choma in Kenya, and you can have it with our pap version, which is ugali, and some kachumbari as well. At the coast, have classic bubbles or some nice, really chilled Chenin Blanc with octopus. We call it pweza. So they just grill it really with salt, right? Fresh from the sea, or you can have also fish we call parrot fish. They call it taffy. It's unscaled. They'll grill it for you with some garlic, and you have to have with some coconut sauce on the side as well. But there's lots of foods you can eat with ugali and skuma, which is a kale. There's chapati, which is like our naan. We also have our jollof, which is pilau.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Which is pilau. So nyama choma in Nairobi, then you can have your pweza or taffy at the coast with some bubbles.
Sounds terrific. I am committed.
What dates should I book for you?
Getting onto my travel agent at the moment. We are done. It's been so nice spending some time with you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I'm so honored to be on your show. I'm a big fan. I watch you from afar, but this has been really great way to end the show.
Thank you very much. Enjoy what is left of it. Safe travels home to Kenya, and I will see you there.
All right. I'll be having the food ready for you.
What a brilliant note on which to end this week for Dan Really Likes Wine at Cape Wine. I will be back tomorrow morning, but with a highlights package from today, as ever put together by the quite brilliant Ronaldo Silvestri. That'll be up tomorrow morning. For now, I've got some more people to go and chat to, some more wine to drink, and more smiles to count, because this has been such a happy occasion. And I think that is the best way of summing it up. Wines of South Africa, supported by the extraordinary people who make up this South African wine industry, have delivered a magnificent few days at Cape Wine. And the industry, after a very challenging few years, is in extremely rude health with a very exciting horizon to look ahead to. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting Dan Really Likes Wine. Thanks to the Woza team, Morena and Siobhan, and everybody else who has helped us to showcase this to the world. And we look forward to seeing us. Jeremy Nell has been watching. Jeremy, glad you enjoyed it. I'm off to drink some more wine. I hope you do the same. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you back with highlights tomorrow morning and live on Monday evening for a Cape Wine wrap-up. From Cape Wine 2022, goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.